decided I'm not going to talk a whole lot about COVID. I don't have much of the news to tell you. I think I haven't seen anything all that exciting since last week. So what I decided to do today, we're going to tackle a very complex topic of detox. And I started thinking about sort of what am I going to present. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is there's my personal growing concern and awareness of the fact that we're entering a pretty dramatic global warming situation, and the amount of toxins in the environment is so rapidly increasing. We are seeing a number of illnesses in the clinical settings that are directly related to toxicity at some absolutely phenomenal rate of increase. Cancers related to toxicity in 20, 30-year-old people, when in the past we would never see this. Asthma spiking in tremendous numbers. And then, of course, those of you who've been following me know that I'm interested in neurodegenerative diseases. And as you know, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are rapidly increasing in frequency. And one of the major reasons that I believe it's happening is the environment. It is not actually what we've been told, which is people getting older. That's actually completely untrue. And I'm not going to discuss in detail why that is, but if you actually look at the trends of those two particular illnesses, the disease is moving towards the younger age. So we see a dramatic increase in people with both Parkinson and Alzheimer's much earlier than before, 10, 15, 20 years before. In the past, when I was in a medical school, Alzheimer's would be basically primarily disease of 8th and 9th decade. Yesterday, I saw a patient with Alzheimer's, severe Alzheimer's at 47, with no genetic background. So the only explanation for that, and at 47, she's already on hospice with Alzheimer's. And the only explanation for that could theoretically be that there's some toxicity that entire Kaiser Permanente system completely missed. So, and that's actually a reason I decided to talk about this today, because I expect that in upcoming 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to start entering healthcare is not going to be ready to give any kind of reasonable advices, because this is completely not taught in medical schools. There is no testing strategies for majority of toxins. They just don't exist. Like if I will tell you that there is zero capacity for healthcare system to effectively screen for mercury and lead. Basically, the lead can be picked up at about 1 to 5, mercury almost 0%. So if you screen someone for those two metals just using a standard approach, which would be a Lab4 or Quest, you're going to miss more than 90% of all the cases. Why that is because in reality, we never evolved effective assessment of toxicity that would be done on a functional scale. The problem is we're looking for diagnoses. When we're looking for diagnoses, we're not realizing that by the time somebody has high mercury or lead level, it's game over, basically. This person is so toxic that the detoxification is probably impossible at that point. Or even if you will detox, the person will be left with a severe medical disease already triggered by that toxicity, and you may not reverse that. You may detox, let's say, the mercury, but you're not going to detox the cancer. So those of you who've been interested, we've already show a very strong link that 90% of all the patients with breast cancer that we saw had very high mercury levels. So we're in a process of enlarging this study, because I don't think we can publish 19 cases study, but we will hopefully collect more cases soon. By the way, if you're interested, at some point in the next, sometime in January, I'll present the study a little bit in case, because we'll be doing recruitment. So we'll need every help we can get. So what I thought we'll do today is I'm going to show you a very brief PowerPoint, and then we're actually going to spend some time on it, even though there's only a few slides. Let's see if I'm going to just need to share my screen. Okay, and something's still going on with my computer, so I hope you can see this. Can you see the PowerPoint? I know it's not in slide mode yet, but it'll be in a second. So the most important point to realize is this is very simplified, and this is borrowed from Metagenics, thanks to the company. So this is basic diaphragm. The detox traditionally, historically, has been divided in 4 phases. I don't think it's important to realize or remember that it's also not quite accurate. There's a lot of inconsistencies here, and this is just a very, very major simplification so that everybody can understand what detox look like and why it's important. So this is, as you see already on a slide, you have a lot of nutrients listed. So those that are listed in green, like glutathione here, for example, would be something that boosts detox or is an essential component of detoxification. The way to think about toxins entering the system, the best way to think about this goes like this. And again, I'm massively simplifying this, but I think that's the best way to think about this, in my opinion. When a toxin enters here, first of all, it will have to become soluble. For it to be moved out of our system, it has to be in the form or in a biochemical shape, which will allow our body to do something with it. Let me give you a very concrete example. I deal with this every day in my practice. So mercury. Mercury can come into our body in organic form, which would be from fish. An organic form is dramatically more soluble. And even though organic form in some way could be considered more toxic, but it's actually a lot easier to excrete because it's already soluble. Or it can come inorganic from silver fillings in the mouth or some other rare sources like certain pollutants in the environment. So those will have to, inorganic will have to get first somehow converted to the soluble, fat soluble, lipid soluble form before it can get out. Otherwise, it'll only have capacity to be stored, shifted in a compartment. In case of mercury, it's usually muscles of some sort, where it sits and just kind of sits there. So if the body is unable to move the toxin around and move it through phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, and again, we'll talk about this in a second, the next best step would be just stick it somewhere and forget about it. This is, by the way, why I'm so careful with weight loss. So people who are very overweight or obese, before they losing weight, I'm always very cautious because it's essential to assess someone's toxicity. Guess what? You see that most of the toxins, mercury is actually an exception, but most of the toxins will be stored in a fat. So when you're rapidly losing fat, those toxins are going to go somewhere. And unfortunately, many of them goes to brain, some of them go to other nerve tissues and other metabolic places. So again, just a little point of caution. Hydrolysis, hydration, dehalogenation. So, oh, I'm frozen now. All right, let's see if I can. Okay. So those are the steps that prepare the molecules to be attached, to be conjugated. That's the technical word for being attached. Conjugated to something, preparing them for removal from the tissues. This happens with this enzyme called, the whole system called cytochrome P450. You may have seen this P450 discussed heavily in relationship to the many medications that people take, right? So certain medications, when they get detoxified or removed, they have to pass through this cytochrome P450 system, okay? So very sophisticated. I'm dramatically simplifying this. I'm not going to go into different P450 systems. There's, frankly, to be honest with you, I don't even know probably 10% of it because it's so complex. But clinically, certain things are very relevant, but I'm just trying to explain the whole system so you kind of grasp how it works first, because it's actually critical to understand for day-to-day living. So first phase has to work well. What does it mean? It means that there's a lot of steps here that can be optimized. You're seeing these things in green. Milk thistle, I'm just going to tell you things that we use all the time. Milk thistle, vitamin C, selenium, turmeric, artichoke, all these things. These are the things, green tea, and all kinds of vitamins up here on top. These are the things that our body needs to take to use to make the phase 1 work well, okay? So the phase 1 in essence, when it's blocked, it's going to make the toxins unable to move to that phase where they need to be conjugated, where they need to be bound to something. This is the worst possible scenario. It's a lot easier to bypass phase 2 and 3 and 4. It's really hard to bypass phase 1. So, we kind of I always kind of joke, I don't know, God made only one mistake when he created us, gave us one liver, should have given us 2 livers, right? Well, except that the liver can regenerate. It's the only organ in our body that if you have some part of the liver that for whatever reason got knocked out, it actually, the rest of the liver can regenerate. So even there's some capacity. But people who have liver failure, why their mortality is so rapid is because they can't really do anything with a normally formed toxins throughout living activity. So when you just move around, when you do regular things, even if you're not facing actual toxins from the environment, there are still toxins that our body generates continuously through the metabolism, through just process of breathing air, etc. Right? So we have to be able to remove all those. So once the toxin is soluble through this pathway, through this phase 1, then everything gets moved, and those first 2 steps happen inside the liver. So then, and again, I'm dramatically simplifying. I understand if some of you are biochemists here, nutritionists, you pardon me, but that's just not, I'm just trying to make this very, very simple before I get to what can we actually do with all this. So the second phase also is critically important. In general population, this is the phase that unless you have a liver problem in the first place, like, I don't know, you have a liver illness of some sort, hepatitis, chronic hepatitis C, or you've been drinking your whole life heavily, right? So then alcoholism will also can knock out phase 1 quite a bit. But phase 2, in some ways, in everybody else becomes even more important because that's where we have a lot of genetic problems. So conjugation can occur through all kinds of ways. The most common, or the most sort of easy to understand, is something called glutathione conjugation. Glutathione is a molecule we make. It's a process of synthesis from dietary amino acid called N-acetylcysteine, or just short NAC. And it's made continuously on demand, mostly in the liver, but actually every tissue makes it, like lungs, for example, make a lot of glutathione because they have to deal with a lot of garbage coming in through the air, right? So conjugation to glutathione is one of the most easy to understand because it's one step. You just bind things to glutathione and you pull it out. And a lot of things follow that way. Most of the metals, definitely mercury, definitely lead, follow glutathione. But even some organic toxins, like mold toxins, for example, often go through glutathione. What I am not showing you, and if you're very interested, we can talk about it, but that gets immediately super complicated. The whole pathway of how all these pathways interact is so sophisticated that I decided not to put this here, but I will mention word methylation. The reason I'm going to mention this, many of you probably familiar with something called MTHFR. There's lots of other genetic mutations called SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism, that knock down the methylation. And this is where we often utilize active form of folate, not the folic acid. I'll come back to that. Oops, sorry. I'll come back to that. But so is active forms of B12, methyl B12, B6, and other nutrients. So the methylation is a critical aspect that recycles a number of things, that tends to be activating glutathione production. So these things are not isolated. They're all in a kind of a back and forth, and all of them connected. So that's why I'm so simplifying. But long story short, the phase 2 will take that soluble toxin, bind it to something, and then make it ready for actual excretion. Okay. And then excretion occurs in 2 pathways. There's actually 3, but the 2 is very, very easy to understand. The third one is so important, we'll have like a separate 5 minutes on it. So the one is obviously a bile, and then when that comes through the bile, through the liver, all the way into the stool, this just comes out through the feces. And then of course the second is to the kidneys, right? So if it doesn't go to the bile, it goes to serum, and then from blood it comes into the kidneys, kidney filter it out into the urine, and we urinate it out of the system, out of the body. The third is critically important, and that is the skin. So we can sweat a lot of this, Interestingly, the pathways of skin excretion is not far off of the serum, far off of the kidney, because you have to really pass it through the blood, close to the skin, and then you're sweating it out, and then you're excreting. We'll come back to that when we talk about actual pathways of what can you do. Again, what I'd like you to pay attention to, look at how many nutrients are required for the effective detoxification. Zinc, magnesium, folate, specifically methylfolate, usually, if you want to be clear. B12, B3, B6, B12, glycine, taurine, methionine, cysteine. So these are all amino acids, by the way. You see here inositol and choline are very important for making the phase 1 being more effective. And then lots of foods and lots of nutrients that can boost it. Okay. So, by the way, when we say toxicity, we don't necessarily mean there's going to be you're going to inhale a mold particle or mold toxin. This is lots of reactive oxygen species. You're breathing the air, you're eating the food, you went for the run, you went for the walk, everything create oxygen species, right? Interestingly, when we normally create this reactive oxygen intermediates, it actually boosts our own endogenous capacity. So the value of exercise for detox is that, yes, you're throwing into the system lots of free radicals when you're very physically active, but that stimulates the system to remove them. And once you remove them, that boosting of the detox continues for quite some time. Some people say it's a day, some people say it's 14 hours. I don't think it really matters. The point is you're revving up the natural metabolic capacity to not only, make your muscles stronger and cardiovascular system, but you also detoxing better. So especially if the exercise is robust enough that you sweat. In fact, you can kind of think of if you're worried about toxicity and you're going to detoxify, try to aim to the type of exercise where you're going to be sweating. Okay. Let me stop sharing for a second and see because this is a heavy topic, there could be tons of questions. What I'd like you to do is drop the questions in the chat. And then I'll move forward because I want to talk about this for at least 5 more minutes, if not more, because now we're moving from basic understanding of how this works to what are we doing about it? Like, what can we do to effectively enhance our detox? And while you're writing the questions, I'm going to say a few words. We used to think back in the day that you could simply do 21 program detox if you go, or 1 week detox every 3 months or whatnot. If you go on Google or on Amazon and you put the word detox in books, you're going to have a revolutionary 14-day detox that's going to change your life. 21-day detox that's going to change your life. And a lot of people swear they will do this aggressive programs, they feel better. Wonderful. I'm not arguing against it, but in essence, it's complete nonsense. And the reason it's complete nonsense, not because it doesn't work, it actually works just fine, but you can't do it that way. You have to continuously detox. You just simply have to work on detox every single day of your life. In generally, my recommendation is that the average 50-plus-year-old person spends 15 to 30 minutes per day thinking and doing active detoxification. That's what I do in my life, and I'll tell you in a second how I do it, okay? So, questions up to here. Because I know it's a lot, I know it's heavy, you may not have understood everything, you may have glanced upon some things. It's okay if you don't understand it fully. It's also okay not to remember any of those like specific names like methylation and transsulfuration and glucuronidation and all this glutathione conjugation. Don't worry about any of that, okay? That's not as important. Okay. No questions? Okay. So I'm going to move on, okay? Unless somebody, and if you rather unspeak, just lift your hand so we can see. Okay, there is a question. So okay. Absolutely not. You cannot say that. So if you're heavy sweater, it doesn't mean anything. It simply means that you sweat a lot. It doesn't mean that you're going to be detoxing well or now on the reverse, if you don't sweat, you have a problem. 100% certain. So if those people who don't sweat at all or sweat very little, guarantee that they have some accumulation somewhere because it's a natural. Yes, it's good to be sweating more. It doesn't mean you don't have a problem. You may think of having some advantage in detoxing to some degree, but even that is very loose because you don't actually know what's happening with the phases 1 and 2 and 3, right? The actual sweating is phase 4, just like urinating or moving bowels. Those is phase 4, right? So yeah, of course. Also, by the way, that's why it's so important not to be constipated. This is why it's so important that you're drinking enough fluids, that your urine is flow continuous, and this idea of keeping urine a bit more less yellow, like more on dilute phase, especially when you're detoxing heavier. This is important. Okay, is the physical work one did through life a cumulative 2 that benefit are still harvested after physical is not strong? Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, so the detox slows down with aging, but the benefit of physical activity is still going to be there, and it's going to be very heavy benefits for the detox. But you're absolutely right, Irene. When we get older, somewhere in age of late 40s, liver begins to slow down. Actually, it's very intuitive. Think those of you who like alcohol, think through your life. What was your relationship with alcohol, right? Like when you were in 20s and 30s, you had a couple of glasses, you didn't even notice it. In your late 40s, couple of glasses of wine at night, and you're not sleeping really well, right? That's because the detox of the liver now becomes to be a bit slower. That's why. So the liver is gradually, just like all other organs, begin to lose its capacity over time, somewhere starting in 40s. Okay, I use tons of herb spices to cook vegetarian, but not there are so much reports that most herb spices are gluten. Okay, very good. So, right. So one way to think about the detox is, well, what if I eat very cleanly and I eat everything organic and I just don't put the toxins in? Absolutely. It's a critical aspect. And Elizabeth, you're 100% right. That's why particularly extracts, particularly concentrated nutrients, so things that are powdered into the capsules, things that are powdered into, somehow concentrated into, like CBD oil, right? Because it's often they extract, I don't know, a pound of hemp to generate a few hundred milligrams of CBD, right? When things are concentrated, the toxins can concentrate too. So it's essential then to eat those organic. It's also we talked in the past, we've had several nutritionists talk to us about eating clean, like, for example, Dirty Dozen, Clean 15 rule on Environmental Working Group. I'll put that dwg.org, Environmental Working Group, just if you're interested. So yeah, those are all really important points. I think at this point in our process, I actually suggest if you have reasonable finances, eat almost everything organic as much as possible. I would just say that things like Clean 15, you can probably skip organic, but most of other things are, if you can afford it, try to get as much things as organic, including the herbs, including the spices. And maybe that's even more important. It's a great question. Okay, turmeric was on the list to help detox. Correct. Does seem one of the nearby. Yeah, so right. So more concentrated forms, things that are particularly put in a fat-soluble form already, what's called liposomal, tend to be a lot more beneficial in a way because it's more bioavailable. So correct, that's really good. Right, so drinking warm water with lemon before eating, it's not necessarily helps the detox. That is misunderstanding. It helps to stimulate the bile flow. And when the bile flows better, yes, you're detoxing, so to speak, in a way, but it's actually more important for digestion function rather than for detox. Although there's a lot of statements out there, especially if you just Google this, that is recommended for detox. Again, what I'm trying to separate here, you often hear people say, oh, come to the spa and do detox, right? Or do this 21-day detox. That's not what I'm talking about. My proposal to all of you is, if you like doing those things and you're going to go first to Canyon Range once a year for 7 days and do aggressive, go for it. My point is, my recommendation wholeheartedly is you do detox every day for the rest of your life. You never stop. You just continuously do it. Okay, so I don't see any other comments. I'm going to spend 5 more minutes and I'm going to actually talk to you what it looks like. And let's already move on away from saying we now trying to consume or trying to live as trying to do as least exposures as we can, right? So there's all kinds of exposures. I'm not going to go into that because it's a whole separate, you can spend hours on how do you sort of try not to get exposed. By the way, I'm going to give you a link to the book about that, which is what I do often recommend. It's a book by Ali Cohen. I think what I'll do is let me just put link to Amazon. Probably easier that way. It's called Non-Toxic by Dr. Cohen, Ali Cohen. It's a relatively new book, very well evidenced. And, the book is not about detox per se. The book is about how to avoid toxins as much as possible. It's basically reviews most of the clinically relevant toxins, as well as sort of, how do you look for it? How do you try to avoid them? And if you do expose to them, what can you do to detoxify? So I'm going to put the book link in there. Okay, so that's there. Okay, so first of all, assuring that the core functions of phase 3 and 4 are working. Bowels daily, at least once, ideally twice. If you're not moving them twice a day, that's fine, just once a day. The moment you start moving to every other day, every third day, that is not normal. No matter who tells you what, it doesn't matter whether it's constipation or not. It has nothing to do with it. If you're going to have a bowels every third day for a decade, you are not excreting toxins as supposed to. So I'm going to repeat this. It doesn't matter whether you define this as constipation or not. The bowels have to happen every day, period. There's no discussion about it. I don't want to argue whether it's relevant or irrelevant what you're calling your bowel movements on every fourth day, whether that's formally diagnosed as constipation. It's irrelevant for the purpose of this conversation. Drinking plenty of water to keep the urine flow well. Now, if you have a renal failure or some kind of a chronic renal insufficiency, things are much more complicated. That doesn't apply to you. You have to talk to your doctors. It's a different story altogether. Sweating. Here's how I think about this. You have to sweat every single day, at least for 15 to 30 minutes per day. Okay, maybe not every day. I'm kind of pushing this a little, right? Okay, 6 days a week, all right? Is that realistic? It's totally realistic. Now, whether on a particular day you're going to sweat because you're exercising or because you're going to go to the sauna, I think that's not as essential, but you got to sweat every day. Why? Think of the size of the skin in terms of the organ. It's one of the largest organs. It's a big value here, right? There's a lot of skin surface. So when you're sweating, you're actually excreting often in a way that you cannot excrete through other mechanisms. So sweating is a very, very important. Let's spend 2 minutes on different saunas because it always comes up. So why is infrared currently all the hype? Well, because the principle is that when your infrared light hits the skin, it penetrates deeper. So it activates thermal upregulation deeper into tissues. When you go into the regular dry sauna, the heating of the tissue happens superficially, and then there's a gradient inside. But infrared hits up everything up to about 6 inches. So it's supposed to be a better, it's better to be microwaved than heat. Just kidding. But in essence, that's the whole point. Microwaves go through the tissues and kind of warm up everything from inside out. So it's sort of the same with infrared sauna. And by the way, they're pretty safe. Don't worry about safety. Except that if you end up getting one, make sure you get a good quality one. So, and then I tend to do this at least in the winter, I tend to do it more. So I probably would do at least 3 times a week, at least for 30 to 60 minutes each time. More the better, but you have to start slow, gradually get to a point of comfort. Okay, great, Janet. Thanks so much for so we had a podcast with Dr. Cohen quite a while back about the book. I highly recommend for everybody to at least listen to the podcast just to start getting better sense of the number of toxins we're bombarded with every day and what are we doing about it. Okay, so in the summer, using sauna is probably less critical because you can think of the fact that you probably sweat a lot more in the summer and it's much easier to simply go for a walk and sweat out. I will critique our culture for 30 seconds. There's all this anti-sweat products out there. Please don't use them. All right. I mean, if you need to go to an event and not stink, okay, fine, put it. But definitely the products that decrease sweating, in my opinion, should be completely removed from the market. In my opinion, those are really bad news. If you're gonna use something, okay, just block the actual smell. Don't block the actual perspiration. I think it's actually, in my opinion, it's barbaric. So we're supposed to sweat. This is what our body does. So it's natural, and trying to block the natural process never ends up well for anybody. Okay, so that's that part. Let me show you in terms of the diet. And again, I know I'm going to take a little bit more time because the topic is complicated. So I'm going to go back to the slides, and I have 2 more slides to show you. So there's this slide, and I'll make sure that I send this to Janet, so we'll put this to you. So this is for my, by the way, Institute of Functional Medicine. So this is the kind of a foods that is supposed to boost natural processes. It's kind of, I guess, for better lack of explanation, to super simplify, there's lots of different ways to think about it. Which particular foods would you eat to stimulate the detoxification of pathways? This is just one way to think about it. You would kind of select, so you would work with nutritionists to select particularities of each. Notice there's a lot of nuts and seeds here. Fiber obviously will bulk up the stool, will make the bowels more regular, you'll move it better. But also, fats are very essential in detox. Remember, everything is about, in our body, needs to pass through the lipids. So when we're detoxing, our capacity to move toxins from one cell membrane to another is critical. That requires a very healthy fat content. This is important. All right, I know it's unrecorded, but oh well. This is why I don't believe in low-fat diets completely. I think they're, in the long run, decades from now, we're gonna look back and say this was barbaric, this was all malpractice, criminal, that we recommended people low-fat diets. Why? Because naturally, we have to consume enough fat to maintain liquidity of membranes. If the content of fats in the diet drops too low, there is a very high potential that your detox pathway, particularly phase 1 and 2, will begin to slow down. It's not been researched enough. What I really feel bad about it, that there hasn't been enough basic nutritional research in this exact question. How much fat should we be consuming to maintain normal detoxification pathways? Okay. All right, so that's all I want to say about this. And the last slide here is, remember when we started talking, I talked a little bit about drugs. Now, drugs also means, of course, all substances. So it doesn't just mean, medications or recreational drugs. It means everything. It means nutrients. It means processing certain vitamins. It means processing, frankly, to me, even the stress itself is a toxin. Why? Because it's going to affect your detox pathways negatively. It's going to slow down detoxification because your organs of excretion are going to slow down. We always say, right, rest and digest. That's the requirement of parasympathetic system. If you upregulate your sympathetic system, suddenly you're slowing down your bowel movements. Your kidneys are not excreting enough fluid. So that's also is essential. It's all together. Reason I wanted to bring this up is to kind of show you what happens. Remember, we talked about glutathione conjugation and all this other stuff, the methylation. We do know how all of this gets processed. Unfortunately, what I don't see happening at all in the medical system is that no one, when you get Tylenol prescribed here, acetaminophen, nobody will tell you that, oh, by the way, if you take enough Tylenol, your glutathione will get shut down completely. You'll end up with very low level. Well, what should you do? Well, you should take some glutathione because you have to counteract this. So this is where things get very sophisticated in that sense. So by the way, it's very typical of me when I see a patient who's been on a very heavy long-term regimen of medications that are going to give them glutathione and acetylcysteine. Those of you who are actually my patients, if you look at your list of vitamins, you're very likely going to find 1 or 2 products whether it's multivitamin or some liver support, that's going to have all those nutrients as a principle to try to counteract what drugs are doing to your liver and to your detox pathways. Okay. All right. And last but not least, and I'm frozen, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try to, I think it's PowerPoint for some reason freezes me. So I'm going to close it. Just give me 1 second. All right. Hopefully that'll get better. All right. Okay. And last but not least, and again, what I think I'll do is Janet the link, the files for this, but I'm going to show you this. So we have a very comprehensive basic detox protocol was worked out in the clinic a long time ago. So I'm just going to show you some basics. So you're going to find here some very specific detoxifying foods. So the cilantro, chlorella, we have this detox, I think it's called cocktail or detox smoothie, where you put some of these nutrients into the smoothie, mix them with things like whey protein. Whey protein increases glutathione, by the way. This is why you often hear it being advertised and recommended. So, you see how we will emulgatory, meaning elimination. So we would like to give you nutrients and different things to try to move everything, right? So then there's going to be liver supporting foods, and also what not to eat, right? So if you take too much bad fats, bad things going to happen. So you need to take good fats. And of course, you're going to remove things that tend to bog down the liver. By the way, this is a little complicated. So coffee can do both. Coffee can slow down detox or it can accelerate it. So coffee enemas are traditionally known to be a very good way of accelerating detox, but taking too much coffee orally may actually slow detox down. So you have to be careful with it. But some amount of coffee actually thought to increase detoxification. Lots of full foods. Elizabeth mentioned somewhere. It's definitely one of herbs and spices, turmeric, cinnamon, licorice. So there's a lot of really well-known foods that boost detoxification. We don't have time to go into particular varieties of this, but there are things generally that are bitter, right? Again, remember we talked a little bit in the past about the importance of bitters. Bitter taste tends to stimulate bile, tends to stimulate detox. Very good things to have, like dandelion, burdock. So those are the bitter herbs that tend to be very good for the liver. Lots of supplements, we already kind of covered them. So those of you who are taking specific B complex, things like homocysteine supreme, although we recorded, that's okay, and others, know that those are often not just to keep your B vitamin levels normal, but they're also critical for detox. The really important detox nutrient called milk thistle, many of my patients are on it, even when they don't have an adherent problem. Why? Because I'm basic and I'm taking this, and I've been taking milk thistle for a long time. Because, again, we need to try to rev up our own endogenous detox pathways as much as possible. There's a lot of data on milk thistle. In Europe, they have a drug called silymarin, commonly used for all kinds of liver-induced toxicities. So just FYI. We will be doing deep breathing for detoxification in a minute. I promise we'll get to that point. But you see, this is why is it important? Because we have to detox not only our physicality, but we have to have a capacity to slow the breath down, to be able to detox lungs, so to speak, from not able to exhale enough CO2, but also just detoxing our mind, slowing down, having less impact of the stress. This is all essential. Filtering water. I don't recommend drinking bottled water for two reasons. One, most of the bottle is going to have some plastic in it, so you're going to consume some plastic pieces. The bigger problem is you don't even know where that water is coming from. When they tell you it's filtered and clean, you don't know. And there's been a lot of studies showing that sometimes bottled water is just as bad as tap. So I just generally recommend everybody filters. Dr. Kogan has a whole chapter there on what do you do with water. You can read that or we can just talk about this with you individually later. Castor oil packs, I'm not going to discuss, we don't have time, but it's one of the very old naturopathic methods. So is the skin brushing. When you remove dead skin, you're kind of revving up capacity of putting the new skin on, and when you exfoliating this dead skin, it removes the toxins. Very similar to sweating. This is one thing I don't do. I don't know. You don't have to do all of this. The point is you have to find your own balanced routine. So some of the things that can, for example, enhance the lymphatic drainage, they're not necessarily based in the concept of skin brushing. You can do it in other ways, right? You can do massage, you can do other things for that. And then coffee enema, this is actually something I do because I do think that's actually very, very valuable. Because again, it stimulates both phase 1 and 2 of the liver. But yeah, again, you have to be comfortable with something like that. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna take 1 or 2 questions, and we're gonna move straight into the practice. No, so I take good question. So I take milk thistle as a combination product with some other. I don't take it every day. And we also didn't talk about specific, when you know you have a particular toxicity. So I was poisoned with mercury in my 20s because of the silver fillings and eating a lot of fish. So now I have to continuously maintain a system in place. So I do take binders a couple times a week, and they're very sophisticated binders. They have specific chemicals that will pull the mercury out of the system. And I will take it 2 or 3 times a week. And by the way, that's when I would definitely take a lot of milk thistle together with it. So there will be it's a couple of products that would be combined that I would take one time. And I quite often combine it with the sauna. So I would take it right after I finish, either before or right after going to sauna. Yes, so I will share the links, the slides, and this basic protocol with all of you. So I'll send everything right after the meeting today to Janet, and she'll pass it on with the recording so that everybody has access to that. I know it took a long time, but this is hard to do in 15, 20 minutes. So I hope you guys like that. I see some people okay with the fact that we took extra time. Water filters. Yeah, so the Brita versus Pure, neither is good actually, unfortunately. You don't want to use very low cost filters. They filter out mostly large chemicals and also bacteria and viruses. They actually don't filter certain smaller toxins. I tend to recommend much higher grade. My preferred brand is Multi-Pure. It's based on the fact that I don't believe that you have to use reverse osmosis. They definitely the best systems. The problem is they waste a lot of water. Most of the reverse osmosis wastes up to 10 gallons per gallon of water generated. I have a problem with that. It's more of a philosophical issue. And I also don't think that there's any evidence side by side to say you have to use reverse osmosis and everything else is not good enough. No one ever done that, in my opinion. So I just at home, we just use decent chemical filter that goes under this sink, and we change it as recommended. It's very important that if you have a filtering system that you change the cartridges as required. The moment that cartridge is saturated, bad news. You're going to overflow, and it's going to excrete a lot more toxins once this capacity is saturated. So make sure and I actually recommend changing it a little bit sooner than recommended period. Don't spend a couple extra dollars on that. Okay, we don't have a lot of time, so let's do a little bit of breathing. And we don't have time to do full elemental breath, but we're going to do abbreviated form. That is definitely my favorite detox breathing. Partially, it links our breath with all the elements. It concentrates our capacity to sync our breath with each element and allow that element, induce purification. Of course, we're not purifying it on a physical level, right? This is a bit more psychological and energetic. We of course understand that. But nonetheless, I do believe it's valuable. 4-7-8 breath is also very good because it's a parasympathetic booster. Again, when you're inducing parasympathetic tone, you rest and digest. When we rest, by the way, a lot of detox occurs at night. So this is also why it's so important to have a good sleep. So let's sit comfortably. Let's spend 30 seconds. I've been talking for a lot. I'm gonna just stretch just for a second. And once you find a comfortable place, I can invite you to close your eyes. And we begin with inhaling and exhaling through the nose. Sensing our feet on the floor. Through that, imagine that you're connecting into the earth, even if you are up above on the top floor of the building. You can still imagine that our feet energetically connected to the earth. Inhaling through the feet, drawing the energy through the feet up into the base of the spine. And when you exhale, you release any physical toxins from our muscles, from our bones, from our tissues, from heavy tissues of our body. Inhaling and exhaling through the nose. So the short version of this practice, you can do 5 breaths of each. So let's do 2 more breaths. Let's move to the water breath. So we inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. We're connecting to the water, the element of water in our body, the most prevalent element. We put our attention in the middle of our belly. We imagine when we exhale that each cell of our body is purified with the clean water. You can imagine as if a wave runs through every cell of our body, washing any impurities inside the cells, moving them out of our cells into the blood and then out of our system. Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth 5 times. Let's do 1 more water breath. And we move to the fire, inhaling through the mouth, exhaling through the nose. Connecting our thinking into the heart, placing our attention on our emotional state, thinking of anything emotional right now in our field that is toxic to us. Maybe it's a frustration with someone, or maybe it's a situation that is heavy on your heart. So this is a good time to let it go. Realize that no matter what that emotion is or what that situation is, that having it chronically affecting us is not healthy. So let's spend a couple of minutes on letting it go. And you can imagine it being sacrificed to the fire, burned and released. In fact, fire is a wonderful way of purifying lots of things. Or recycle lots of things. If we can't fully get rid of certain toxins by burning them, we can dilute them into the atmosphere at least. Check in with your body, make sure nothing is tense. If any part of your body tensing, pay attention to it. There may be some information there. Maybe it's a thought that's tensing you up or a particular emotion that would be good to release, or at least to ask to be released if you're not quite ready to release a particular problem. Remember, just like physical, chemical, biochemical detox takes phases, so do our thoughts, our emotions. They also take phases and time to deal with, to detoxify. So let's take one more fire breath. And we're moving to the air, inhaling and exhaling through the mouth, gentle breath, placing our attention into the world of our thoughts, realizing that every day we have a lot of toxic thoughts, thoughts that slow us down, thoughts that are not serving us well at all. Thoughts may actually induce extra stress we don't need. And often those thoughts are actually not based in reality, they're based in some generated ideas internally that are not maybe the original trigger is real, but thinking around it may not. So see if there's any particular thoughts today that you don't want to have or that you want to work on. So concentrate on those. Inhaling through the mouth and exhaling through the mouth. Releasing any attachments. If particular thought kind of stuck, it's okay. Just let it be there and see if you can gently move your attention away from it to something else. Best analogies of this is like clouds. You know, we just watch them, they're just passing through. So our thoughts, they just pass through. Our thoughts are not us. So let's take 2 more air breaths. And if you need a location, then you will concentrate on your forehead, where we usually associate our thoughts. We think that our thoughts are generated. Okay, and the last breath is an ether breath, kind of combines all elements together. And this is a more of a connection to the greater, connection to divine, your personal relationship with the universe, with other people, with the nature. And so you can think of there, if there are any particular issues with your relationships that need to be clarified or cleared, or anything that needs to be released. So this would be the ether breath. And ether breath, you can inhale and exhale through the nose and mouth together. Very gentle, very subtle breath, but slow breath. Also, let's do 5 breaths. Okay, so let's finish the last breath. And let's close this by, if you have glasses, take them off. And rub your hands for a couple of seconds together like this. And then gently put them over your face. And maybe just slightly move it up and down, just to release any tension in the face, in the eyes. Remember, physical tension of the body is a toxicity also, because it stresses the rest of the system. So that is the value of massage, by the way. The most important value of massage, in my opinion, is that it kind of releases the physical stressors of the system. There was a question to me about the infrared sauna. I prefer infrared sauna over regular sauna because of the fact that you actually sweat a lot more profusely in it. Those of you who've ever done it, you would realize that you can be in an infrared sauna for 30, 40 minutes and sweat tremendously. But in the regular sauna, you will not be able to sit for 30 minutes. You'll go in for 5, 10 minutes. So you have to do multiple rounds, take breaks in between. Logistically, a bit more difficult. So probably as effective, but nobody ever compared the infrared with regulars.
Misha, Irene just flashed numbers at you.
I don't know what that means.
Irene, you can unmute yourself.
Does that mean is the time you spend in infrared sauna 15 minutes? I don't know if I got that right.
No, I'm a sauna taker from way back. I can do 30, 40 minutes.
In
It's
one
like,
setting?
yeah.
No. Yeah, that means you're in the wrong sauna, sorry.
Yeah.
No. There's no way in a real sauna of 180 to 190 degrees, no human being.
Maybe it's lower degree.
But if it's lower degree, it doesn't have a lot of value.
Okay.
You have to, in order for you have to think of it this way. If you're not sweating to the point where you have like a towel on the floor and it's completely soaked in your sweat, you're not sweating right.
Okay.
If you're just sitting there and you have a couple of droplets of a sweat, that is not.
I sweat a lot.
Okay, so maybe fine. Maybe you're a very rare individual who can do that, then it's great. Most people will have you have to actually be careful in a sauna, and especially in a regular sauna. If you overheat, you may have a heart problem. So the regular saunas, you have to be a lot more cautious.
Okay.
Yeah, infrared saunas are much cooler. They go up to about 150. The regular saunas, like especially if you're doing something crazy like the traditional Russian of Finnish, where they do those, the branches. They can go up close to 200. Yeah. So the at least 190 for sure. If you go to like a Korean spa, for example, the world spa, most of those saunas are not anywhere near where it should be. And the same with the gyms. Most of the spas in the gyms will go to 170 or something. I mean, you'll sweat some. It's good. It's better than nothing. I'll tell you that for sure. But it's not as effective. So.
Okay, got it.
Infrared sauna. Okay, good questions. Infrared saunas you can buy, and then just put it in your house. That's the easiest thing because they don't require complex setup. It takes about an hour to put them together, and then you plug them into the regular wall power outlet. The building's regular saunas require a lot of effort and usually need professional to set it up to the code and all that. But the regular saunas, you just buy, put it together in infrared saunas. They are not cheap. I mean, you can find them for a few $1,000s. The better ones are probably somewhere 4 to 6, depending on the size. So it's kind of a one-time investment. They tend to be lasting a very long time because those elements don't burn out easily. So the regular saunas, people will like put them in a vacation house, for example, right? I recommend everybody just get infrared. Cost of infrared versus building the regular is about the same. So it makes more sense to simply put infrared. It's also a lot cheaper to operate long-term because the regular saunas, especially if you're doing like your typical heating elements with electricity, I mean, you're talking like major increase in electricity spend versus the infrared. They heat up in a different way and they don't need a lot of electricity. Steam baths, not really. They're not detox, right? Steam baths are great for the breath. They're great for skin quality. They're great for just like general relaxation. They really don't detox you very well because the moisture prevents you sweating as much. So you're kind of locking the toxins in. So it's really dry sauna what we're talking about particularly. Yeah, so exactly. So you would put infrared sauna somewhere near the bathroom or in a basement, or like we have in both houses, in vacation house and in the main house, we have them in the basement on the base level. Just easier that way. But you can install them anywhere. Is infrared anything good? I'm not sure what that question means. Yeah, so we're talking about infrared saunas there. Just infrared light if it's not in an enclosed environment. And I don't recommend the portable. I don't recommend blankets and all those things. The problem with infrared, it's going to heat up the material a lot. And if it's not wood, it's going to upgas. So if you have a synthetic material, it's going to generate toxins. So you have to be very, very careful. There are some certain devices and certain blankets that are made from completely natural materials. Those would be okay, like a cotton or something. But most of the portable saunas made with synthetic materials, you have to be very careful. I can't endorse any because I don't even know if any good ones out there. So. All right. Lots of good questions. Sounds like this topic was of value. So I guess, Janet, you want to come up here to add you to the spotlight?
Hi, friends.
Since we're not gonna see each other until end of the year, wishing everybody wonderful holidays. And I picked this topic also. You're gonna partake in some maybe not so healthy meals, and that's okay. And maybe you'll have some alcohol, that's okay. But you can detox, right? So you can spend a bit more time taking some of these festivities in and then boosting your detoxification so that you kind of balance that out. At least that's what I'm doing for sure. It's guaranteed. So, and by the way, I forgot to mention this, but the whole idea of detox goes in every single culture, whether it's, traditional Chinese medicine, whether it's Ayurveda, whether it's Native American healing tradition. You look at every tradition, there's always some heavy detox. In Chinese medicine, there's a whole system how you do this. There are liver boosting herbs, there are acupuncture techniques to boost the liver, all kinds of stuff. And the Native Americans, of course, the ceremony of sweat lodges, right? In Ayurveda, there's a whole system of like they even have a whole like arm of the entire Ayurveda specifically designed for detox. So every natural system or every traditional system of the world has this aspect of it. So with that, we suggest that you have a wonderful holidays, detox well. And I don't know, maybe Janet wants to say something before.
Be kind to yourselves, give yourselves grace. If you have reason to be sad during this season, we're going to include a link to the wonderful video that Dr. Delia did, right?
Okay.
And just enjoy time with your family and your friends.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
Happy New Year. Whatever else, Kwanzaa, whatever you're celebrating. Happy. Bye.
Bye. We appreciate you.